I think people who are good at math are mostly just people who are told they're good at math. And I don't think it has anything to do with baking. But I think it's still like subtly there where I'm like, I'm just really good at math because I'm a baker. You know, I can do really simple addition and subtraction and division like that, if you need me to. Which turns out nobody really needs you to anymore, so it's kind of like a dead skill. It's like how I took Latin for 4 years in high school. I wonder how good these are. We'll see. What am I making today? I have been after a gluten-free raised dough for a very long time, and every one that I've tried has been trash. So today I'm trying their gluten-free rich bun dough, and we're going to make cinnamon rolls, hopefully. This is Pamela's gluten-free, vegan, all-purpose, artisanal, whole grain, 1-to-1, gluten-free flour. Now, if you're familiar with the world of gluten-free bakeries, which I am familiar with too, this one and Erin McKenna Bakery, I wrote down this recipe to try and familiarize myself with it. It's pretty standard as far as what's in it. It's got milk, sugar, yeast, oil, eggs, salt, and flour. So we're going to bloom the yeast, add the other dry ingredients, and the weird part is, since it's gluten-free, we're going to mix it with the paddle attachment. And we aren't going to do a first rise, we're just going to immediately roll it out. Usually I would leave it to rise, and this time I'm just going to follow what the recipe says and see how it turns out. We'll edit all this in post. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is bloom the yeast. We have active dry yeast here, and we have milk, and I need a scale. And it calls for 1.5 cups of milk. I'm going to do a half recipe because there's literally only 2 of us here, and I will eat an entire tray of cinnamon rolls. So it's mostly for my own self-protection that I don't make a full batch of them. 360, 180 grams of milk. Okay. Half of 150 is 75 grams of sugar. And it calls for two tablespoons of yeast. So I'm going to do 1 tablespoon, which, okay, hear me out. Technically, one of these is 2 1/4 teaspoons. 3 teaspoons makes a tablespoon. So we're about 3/4 of a teaspoon off if we only use 1 of these. If this recipe goes horribly wrong, this is where it went wrong. I'm only going to use 1 packet. It really feels like it should be enough yeast. However, I could be wrong. She did write a book and write this recipe down in the book, so it probably was tested. But, oh well. So we have our yeast and our sugar in here because yeast likes sweet things, and it also likes warm things, so we're warming up the milk. So I'm going to pour this in here. I feel like I'm describing stuff that doesn't need to be described. Like, I'm clearly pouring it in that bowl. But we do have to let it sit for a little bit. So I'm going to let that sit for a few minutes. And in the meantime, I'm going to measure our flour out. 165?
1.5.
165.5. This doesn't do the halves for me. Wait. 531, so 265. Did I say 265?
I think you said 165.
Okay, so I was like, that doesn't look like that flour. Alright, so the last 2 things that are going into this that we're going to add once this finishes proving itself are eggs and oil. Now it calls for 2 eggs, but since we're doing a half batch, I'm only going to do 1. And you'll notice that this recipe, while it's gluten-free, has dairy and has egg in it, which I know can be like food allergy-wise problems for people. I don't have non-dairy milk, so I'm just using dairy milk because that's what I have available to me. Okay, we need 40 milligrams of oil. However, I think the egg is necessary. So if you can't do egg, what would be a fun thing to try out is the Just Egg product, because that's been the most similar to like an egg in my experience. I don't think something like a flax egg or something would work with this. All right, so once this bun dough is mixed, we're allowed to immediately roll it out. Now, when it comes to rising dough, usually you do one rise before you roll it out and use it. So if you wanted to do that if you want to do this recipe with a wheat flour, you would do that proof. However, with the gluten-free, apparently it rises really fast, so you don't have to do that. So we're not going to do a proof with this. I was under the impression that when you do the initial proof with things, the biggest thing you're doing is developing flavor. However, based on my minimal knowledge of how all of this stuff works, it appears that there's something going on with the gluten-free flour where you don't need to do that. This is how much I went to school for, which was political science. So if none of this really checks out, it's probably because I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just know based on working with it and being like, I think it's this. I also forgot the salt. So we need a half a teaspoon of salt. I got in my little dish here. That's almost ready to go. However, I think I'm gonna get this ready now. So this says 5.5 tablespoons or 75 grams of unsalted butter or vegetable shortening for the inside of your buns. Again, if you were trying to avoid dairy, it's really easy to add a vegetable shortening to the inside of a roll. You might not get the same caramelization that you get with the butter just because of the milk fat content. It's obviously not present in any vegetable shortenings. It's why you can't make a vegan brown butter no matter how hard I've tried. You have to basically replicate that flavor, and a lot of the extracts that create a buttery flavor have butter in them, which is just like the height of irony. Okay, so I'm gonna use the same one that I did the milk in because it doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna do, well, I need to scale back. I don't know how you do 5 1/3 tablespoons. Like, cut 1/3 of a tablespoon of butter, you can't. All right, and this is calling for 1 cup of light brown sugar. It's saying it's 179 grams. Let's see, it's gonna be 16 tablespoons, which is 16 times 3. Look, I'm not even using my fast math, I'm using my phone. And 2 teaspoons is 8 grams. 192 grams is a cup. This might not matter a ton because you're basically just filling the dough with it. So like when we do it, you'll see how we're using it. Unlike something that it might be in, however. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen to what this recipe says. We're gonna round up to 180 though, because 179 is really hard to divide in half, and it's gonna be, we're gonna do 90 grams in here. The thing is, we might need more than 90 grams, we might need less. We're gonna sprinkle it on and see. We need to talk about a pet peeve I have with cinnamon rolls, which is when people add too much cinnamon to them. I don't really comprehend why people want to add a ton of cinnamon to something just because it's called a cinnamon roll. It's literally the only flavor in the roll besides sugar. You'll taste it, I promise you. I'm going to open this and sprinkle it on the way that I would normally with a cinnamon roll. If you want to like go for it with the cinnamon and do a full recipe with a 1/4 cup or a half recipe with 2 tablespoons, which is 1/8 of a cup or a half of a 1/4 of a cup, go for it. It doesn't actually even need to be in the roll. You can just put it in the glaze too, if you really want to. This isn't coming out. Okay, we finally have fun yeast mixture stuff. Alrighty, so we already have everything measured out, and we're just gonna plop. Let me get one of these guys. We're going to plop this in with that. This in with that, and then paddle attachment, and this only needs to mix for 1 to 2 minutes, but so as this was mixing, it got a lot thicker. It says it's supposed to come together as a ball though, and if you look at this, it looks not like a ball, it looks like a batter, which leads me to believe I should mix it a little more. And then I might add a little more flour. We'll see. Maybe the egg was too big. I'm not sure how this is going to work. We're going to try it though. Remember earlier when I said, if this is messed up, this is where it went wrong? If it's messed up, this is also where it went wrong. The tip in the cookbook is to get parchment paper We did it. We made it. So it says to put parchment paper down and liberally dust it with flour, which I don't know about you, but I think that's like basically cover it in flour. This does look a little thicker than it first appeared to be. This is going to be 5 minutes of me trying to get this out of this bowl. Okay, look out. I made way less of it than I was anticipating. Ooh, it does feel like dough. Oh my god, guys. That's very exciting. I think I might even be able to use this bad boy. Alrighty, so when you're making cinnamon rolls, you're trying to make a rectangle, fill it, roll it, and then slice it into rolls. So we're gonna do our best to roll this out. Well, it's not rolling very well, but and it's a little difficult to make a circle into a rectangle. But if you apply pressure with the rolling pin in certain ways and pull out from the centers to the corners, you can kind of get there. And if you're trying to make your cinnamon rolls look super fancy, like a bakery where you want them to be super even, just trim it into a rectangle because that is what they do. Coming to you live from a professional kitchen, dough squishing. Usually recipes will tell you how thick to roll things out. That one, unless I didn't read it properly, didn't seem to. So now it says to brush this melted butter on that we have. I don't have a pastry brush because I only came across the country with so many things and it felt like the KitchenAid was overkill already, even though it hasn't been. So we're going to spoon it over the bread. Normally on buns, I would just put a room temperature kind of situation of the butter, and I would, you know, spread it all the way out to all the corners and everything, sprinkle my sugar on, sprinkle my cinnamon on. I would melt it though, which is interesting. Seems like a lot of butter. All right, so we got the melted butter on there, and now we're going to do the brown sugar. So, usually I do a little sprinkle action on this. But as far as the insides of these go, what you're looking for is a nice even layer of cinnamon or of sugar to all the edges, because it's just in there to basically caramelize and add a little bit of sweetness. I would argue that a lot of American breakfast-related desserts are too sweet. All right, so this is a pretty even coating of the sugar, and I'm just kind of pressing it in a little bit to get it to kind of squish with the butter. Now we've come to the cinnamon, which is where I'm supposed to add 2 tablespoons, which would effectively be this entire canister. I'm going to lightly sprinkle it over. And the really good thing about the parchment paper is you have like a nice cleanup where you can just throw this thing away. Unless you're like me, where you also got flour outside of the parchment paper. All right, so now you want a really tight roll, and it's saying that you should be able to roll this up by taking the parchment paper and rolling it, which is a little, you know, pastry tip. And that makes sense with the gluten-free. You don't need to do this if you have gluten in it, but gluten-free stuff can sometimes break a bit. All right, we're getting there. I want to get 6 out of this, which I think, I'm gonna squish them a little bit. So usually what I do when I'm trying to get a certain amount, I start in the very center, and then I think, okay, I need to get 3 out of this. These are gonna be big boys. 2, 3. the tail, and they say that they tuck the tail underneath. Oh, that did not work. Okay, maybe that worked. Perfect, just as I planned. It's kind of wild that we just like use metal to bake casually and just sort of like, this is trash now. Now, most recipes are written by people who pretend they're better at planning than everyone else. And they're like, preheat your oven and prepare your pan. And while that's like all well and good, most regular people, or maybe just me, forget to preheat their oven and forget to prepare their pan. But the good thing about this is it doesn't take very long, and these need to sit anyway. So we're gonna get all these ready, pop them in this pan, cover it in saran wrap or cling wrap or whatever you call it, and pop them in a slightly warm oven to prove, because we want these to double in size. All right, I'm gonna tuck the tail again here. I don't approve of this. This feels very weird. Every time I do stuff like that, I think there is a scenario where the entire bag of flour wasn't put on that countertop exactly right, and it's just gonna fall and go everywhere. And that's just my life every day. That's how I live every moment in my life. Like it's a 4-pound bag of flour that I didn't put on a countertop right. Maybe I'm like gonna become a tuck the tail advocate after this. All right, so I'm squishing these down a little bit just because they got a little chunky as far as like height. Whatever size pan you choose, you need to fit all your rolls in a pan or 2 pans. Now this one I'm gonna do 5 around the outside. And I'm gonna put the tiny guy in the center. You could also get those little things that look like shower caps and you can reuse them, which I do have at home, so that you don't have to deal with whatever chaos ensues when you rip the plastic wrap like this. Well, I think people know how to put plastic wrap on things. I mean, as much as you can know how to do it, because look at this. This is good to the kids, guys. All right, so these are wrapped up. They need to rise, and then we're gonna bake them. I'm thinking about 45 minutes and check on them. It is gluten-free, so maybe it'll rise a little faster. I wanna pop them in my oven. I have a little oven thermometer in here, which is saying I'm about like 175 degrees, which is a little warm. I'm gonna pop them there. It shouldn't be too bad, because the oven obviously isn't on anymore, so it'll just get a little cooler. I'm really excited because they look like cinnamon rolls, which with gluten-free stuff, I don't really make one that looks like a real cinnamon roll. And these are ready to go in the oven. We're just waiting for it to preheat. And then we're gonna bake them for 25 to 35 minutes at 375. While we wait for the oven to preheat, we can make the glaze. There's glaze, and then there's icing, and then there's frosting. And to be quite honest, all of those are different for some reason that I'm never really clear on. We are going to make not a frosting, because that's very thick, and a glaze is pretty thin, so maybe we're making an icing. Maybe we're making an icing. If you ever want to develop shoulder problems, this is a really good way to do it. All right, I'm gonna add some sugar, and as far as this goes, I basically just look for a certain consistency that I like. And if you're smarter than me, you would have started with a much bigger bowl than this. But, you know, you work with what you got. Try this giant whisk for a bit. All right. We're at 350, so we have 25 more degrees to go. Oh, okay. Like a glove. It hasn't been 25 minutes, but they smell and look done. So I'm going to pop in here and grab them out. So by the looks of them, a lot of the filling kind of fell out to the bottom, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing. You can see it's caramelizing a bit. And the rolls themselves look bready, which is really nice. kind of plop a little bit on the center of each one. And I always love to do this when they're still warm because you get better coverage, and then you also kind of get it, I think, going back into like the little cracks and crackles that are in these. Well, these look really good. All right. So obviously now we need to try one because what's the point? Okay. It's a hot cinnamon roll, so it could not be good. One thing I'm noticing that's really awesome about this recipe is if you are gluten-free, I'm sure you've experienced the crumbly, cookie textured doughs in the past. This one really tastes like a raised dough, and I think it's just probably extremely exciting if you were to try this at home as a gluten-free person, just to have that mouthfeel, that texture. You just don't get it a lot. You kind of notice a little bit of flavor with the different flour if you're used to eating different kinds of flour, but overall I'd say this is a really good gluten-free, straight up good cinnamon roll recipe, and I hope you try it. Let me know if you try it or if you have any thoughts or questions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. People always do that in their videos, makes them official.